Hello and welcome to the Audiobook Club, the place to be to keep updated with everything happening at the Audiobook World Awards Academy. For those not in the know, the Audiobook World Awards Academy envisions a world where the primary tools to globally promote culture and education are none other than audiobooks. Here at our Academy, along with our brilliant partners, we champion and celebrate authors and the teams behind their creations. We are officially on the road to the Awaa Night, held in Monaco 2023, an event to rise above them all, recognising the very best of audiobook titles produced from every corner of the globe. We're going to be breaking down how the ranking system works in just a few moments. But first, I would like to introduce you to our very special guest. Joining me on today's show is one of the jurors at Awaa, analysing the excellence the audiobook industry has to offer. He is a world-renowned writer and translator of multiple articles for the New York Review of Books and close to 40 novels, many receiving Italy's highest literary award, Mr. Anthony Sugar. You have no doubt heard glowing testimonials of Anthony's work, and we couldn't be more thrilled to have him as part of the family. Anthony, it's truly a pleasure to have you joining us on the show. How excited are you that we're now officially on the road to the Awaa Night?
Well, John, and you can call me Tony. I think that we're going to be working together and I'm looking forward to it. And now that we're officially started, I think I can say that I am officially excited. I think this is an unbelievably cool thing. We're in the middle of a really interesting transition from writing to voice. And that's going through sort of every angle, every corner of our society. We don't talk on the phone anymore. We exchange emails. We don't read books anymore. We listen to them. I think it's an exciting time.
I couldn't agree more. Absolutely. Okay, so let's take a look at how the Awaa ranking system works. We've split the best received and highest ranked audiobooks from three varieties of distribution: the big five, small press and independent, of both fiction and non-fiction releases, and broken them down into their genres. Each book represented has their official rating score, which we then use to determine a winner. To put it simple, the higher the score, the closer the audiobook is to the top. But remember, as the months go by, every review, every reaction, however the book is received from either a critic or the general public, will change that score. So it's vital to keep coming back and checking on the placements in every category, as they will be changing. Tony, taking a look at the current top 5 books sitting in their respective categories, are there any that speak out to you?
They're really an interesting assortment, and the idea that each reader, each voter in this whole process can really change the flow of the thing is fascinating. I'm interested to see a lot of old names which have been around for a long time and have a new life as an audiobook. So I'm seeing Tolkien, I'm seeing Ken Follett, I am seeing, to go really far back, Flavius Josephus, the great historian of the uprising against the Roman Empire. I'm also seeing Dolly Parton, and that is an entry I'd like to look at closely. That's interesting life, interesting mind, fantastic person. Heather Cox Richardson is a political commentator that I've been fascinated with, and who's been writing about this really interesting is a word that I think we can use. There is an ancient curse about may you live in interesting times, and we certainly live in them. Heather Cox Richardson is one of the best commentators out there working and writing about exactly what is going on in our countries. And if you know what it is, then you don't need to read her, but I think we're all perplexed and would like to know more. So these are books that I'm very interested in seeing how they're doing, but that's nothing. It's going to take us months to unpack what's going on in these listings, and we'll be watching them, both the horse race and the intrinsic interest of the books.
I couldn't agree more. Currently sitting at the number one in the historical fiction category, coming out of small press, Diana Gabaldon's Go Tell the Bees That I Am Gone, which is book 9 in the Outlander series. I'm such a fan of this series. It brings together so many components that are simply Moorish, ever leaving you wanting more, and superbly narrated by Davina Porter, who brings such versatility to the tone of the project. It's currently sitting at the time of recording at 48.84. This is a great contender and well worthy of its placement in my humble opinion. To get access to the official ranking list, you can do so by visiting our website, awa.academy. We would also like to encourage you to sign up as a member. By doing so, you'll be able to cast your votes for your favourite audiobook titles, as well as many other membership benefits. It's completely free and very simple to join up. For more information on becoming a member, once again, head over to awa.academy. What an exciting time to be an audiobook producer and not to mention a listener. Tony, I'd love to know your thoughts. Why is the audiobook industry currently taking the world by storm? What is it about a simple story being told that is so incredibly stimulating?
Well, I think it's intrinsic in human nature to respond to the human voice, the human intonation, the kinds of things that we are constantly searching. We're always looking for meaning, and we're always looking for a jungle gym to play on in terms of parsing the meaning. For when we look at words on a page, we're definitely looking we conjure up a voice in our mind, but when we're actually given that voice, then we can listen to that voice and read into it and understand what they're saying. And if the narrator is talented and sensitive and empathetic to what's in the book, then we have a companion on this long trip through a book. So I think that's what's going on. When we were talking before, I mentioned the old saying, and it's a very old saying. It comes from the Bible. It's in Ecclesiastes, and then it's been reclaimed by various writers over the years, which is how writing works. And it is, everything old is new again. Everything old is new again. Think about that. The original, one of the earliest storytellers was Homer, reciting the Odyssey and the Iliad, thinking it up as he went along. So nothing could be more exciting than not just to read the Odyssey, but to be there with the author of the Odyssey as he's revising and thinking these things through. That is what you get from the voice of someone reading a book.
It sort of adds this whole new dimension to a story, doesn't it? With a narration, you know, that narration process, the little nuances that narrator can often add, sort of following the story makes that story richer and sort of more easily digestible, I think. And it sort of makes a story more relatable, I would say.
Absolutely. One of the things that caught my eye just a few days ago, the great Ray Liotta, who is kind of the narrator. He is the narrator of Goodfellas, and we just lost him, sadly. At the beginning, when he's describing being a kid and he's looking out the window, this isn't an audiobook, but if you look at Goodfellas, once you start thinking about audiobooks, you start to see them everywhere. And he is describing the Goodfellas who were in the club across the street from him. And at one point, he talks about Tootie. Tootie is the brother of the main boss. And there's this moment where he pauses, looks at him and says, Tootie. Just that little detail, which, by the way, he ad-libbed.
Oh, really?
A good narrator can just bring, with the deftest, slightest touch, can bring worlds into a story.
I always find it fascinating as well of how they conjure up so many voices. I've spent the last few months speaking and interviewing with some amazing, talented narrators, and their whole process of coming up with voices. And I think it's maybe very similar to how a writer may see the world, and that is, as you mentioned earlier, often pinching, maybe a little bit naughtily, pinching things from other people, and that's exactly what narrators do when coming up with these characters' voices. They draw back, they draw into their memories, their vault of experiences and vault of voices that they've heard over the years of their life, and they bring them out and sort of exaggerate them and change them slightly to fit the character. So I think it's quite a funny thing to always think that if you're friendly with the narrator, that your voice is never safe from being taken advantage of and used in a book.
Well, and that's just taking it's tribute. It's homage. It's like if somebody has something great, then everybody wants to have a piece of it, don't they?
Oh, absolutely.
I'm a literary translator, and when I have a series of books that I've translated that are set in the 1930s, and I inevitably go to Raymond Chandler, and it's, these are crime stories, and I pick little phrases that I just throw into the Italian. Was that in the original Italian? No. But it's a perfect equivalent of what it is that was there. So it's always a form of translation. You're always bringing things across. One, again, to go to the movies, and I'm sorry about that, but there's an interview with Claire Danes where in one scene in Homeland, she goes through so many different states of mind, and the interviewer says, "How did you do that?" And she said, "I have no idea." I mean, it takes place, I'm sure, if many of these narrators, if they said, they might be able to tell us the story, but exactly how they did it, I'm sure they don't know. It's a little bit like watching an acrobat. I think that there may be a little bit of that fascination when a reader listens to something that they can just, when what do we call them with audiobooks?
I think it's sort of interchangeable, isn't it? Listener or reader, because you're still a reader, yeah.
So when the listener hears it, they intuitively recognize it, and that's one of the things I like about it. A written book, there's no question. But when you have it being read in that oldest of traditions, conjure up the campfire. We're sitting around and listening. When you can see somebody doing something really skillful and talented, and these narrators are incredible. The work that they do is beautiful, and we have no idea how many takes it took them to get the version that we hear. So this is high artistry, and this is high wire act. So it's very interesting.
Absolutely. It takes, on average, the average narrator, it takes about double the amount of time to finish the recording hour. And then you have pickups on top of that if they're doing their own post-production. It's a lot of work, a lot more than people just think. I mean, the kind of, I guess, the cliches, it's just reading a book, and that couldn't be further from the truth, actually. The amount of performance that goes into it, the amount of understanding that one has to have of the content before they go and, narrate it. It really is a skill. And not to mention the whole production team of, around an audiobook. You have the editor, you have the engineer, you have the proofer, you have the director, producer, and all those folks. And it takes a big effort to bring that product to the masses, really. Do you think that, you mentioned by the campfire, those stories being told, do you think that is the reason why it's such a big hit with people? It's sort of, do you think it hits something within us?
Well, I think that one of the things that has been commented upon quite a lot, and we were talking about the political situation and just the general state of society we've been in. These are very dramatic times, and this is a time of great loneliness, and nothing reaches out and touches like a human voice. I remember when TV was thought to have destroyed radio. Well, that changed, didn't it? The radio and podcasts have come charging back with such incredible power. And part of it is, these are things that people can do when they're running, people can do when they're swimming, even these days. And certainly they can do when they're driving. And so that's part of it. But I think that part of it is just that there is no replacing. All the technology in the world isn't going to change who we are and how we're wired in here. So we want to hear a human voice. We want to have human contact. And the words can, writing is a very new technology, all things considered. We're going back to the original technology of words and narration. So I think it's sort of self-explanatory, but surprising when you stop and look at it. And I think a little heartening, because, what could be more human-centered in a time when robots are going to be taking over everything, I guess, than an actual warm human voice telling you a story. it makes sense when you think about it that way to me.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. You can certainly draw the parallels of, maybe as a child, if you had a bedtime story read to you by a parent or guardian, you can certainly see why people seek comfort or find comfort. Maybe not, they don't, originally seek comfort from wanting to listen to an audiobook, but then for some reason feel incredibly drawn to it. And I think you've hit the nail on the head there.
I went to summer camp, and a camp counselor that we had used to tell us scary stories. I mean, there was no comfort there. It was, it was, and we were so delighted because kids are delighted. This was not somebody reading you a story about turns out to be very nice and three nice and understanding bears whose home is invaded. No, these were terrifying stories. And all of us, when it was time to turn the light off, we were both, I want to hear more, and please don't turn the light off. So terror, horror, I mean, the human voice can reach in and grab us in so many different ways. And we just like it because we're social beings. It is a very social thing to do when you're alone.
Yeah, absolutely. It does draw on those, as you mentioned, the horror and the thriller genres. That's a whole another bottle of fish. Is that the expression? Have I just mixed two expressions? Kettle of fish. That's it. No one's having a bottle of fish.
Afterwards, you can probably bottle it, whatever it is you're cooking in the kettle. But a bottle of fish, I'm all for it because that's a good name.
It could be a band. It's the title of our first album when we when we do the soundtrack to this show.
I think if I ever have a band, I want to call it Could Be the Name of a Band. That would just be the name of my band.
I like it. I like it a lot. Are there any books, any classics perhaps, that you would love to see as an audiobook adaptation?
Well, it's interesting. I was thinking about that. We've been talking about it. There are three that I've kind of narrowed it down to because, of course, there's just endless. One is a book that probably very few of our readers have ever heard of. It's called Quel pasticciaccio brutto de via Merulana, and it's by Carlo Emilio Gadda. It is one of the great books of the 20th century in Italian literature. It's the story of a murder in a very well-to-do neighborhood of Rome, but it's also implicitly the story of the author, who was from Milan, of his falling in love with dialect and accent and local regional ways of talking, expressing, and being. And the accents are just spectacular. They're there on the page, they're shaped in Italian, and they're virtually untranslatable. A good friend of mine, William Weaver, who translated The Name of the Rose and translated a lot of Italian post-war fiction, translated that book. And I remember asking him, so how did you deal with the dialect? And he was like, well, I just left it out. And so, in fact, the book is about maybe 2/3 the length of the original. But with an audiobook, now there you could have some fun. There you could have a little bit of the Roman swagger and shove, that's so much in there. And I'm not going to go into the kind of Roman dialect, though. There was one phrase that I sometimes say, and Italians always find it amazing, but I've managed to kind of, it's, what's this, somebody said, arrocha ma risurti. I don't know if that gives you an idea of the kind of peg-legged Roman, braggadocio, but it's there throughout the book. So how you would do it, how could you speak the English and have the Italian kind of be there as a ghost? I'm not sure, but the audiobook seems to suggest that might work. Another book that I would totally love to hear as an audiobook, and let me put a caveat on that, for all I know exists as a fantastic audiobook, so I'd want to know, is The Odyssey. The Odyssey is one of the great stories of all time. It's one of the first stories of all time. And, there has to be some kind of cost equation and kitsch equation. One of the forerunners of audiobooks is the old radio drama. and
Yes, yes.
guns go off and lamps get knocked over and all kinds of things. Bottles are broken. Foley artists live on this kind of stuff.
Yeah.
So you know, if you did the Odyssey, would you hear the wine dark sea? Would the ships rise up on the sand, be run up on the sand, and you'd hear it? What kind of an experiential equation could you, what kind of experiential, voyage could you bring out of the Odyssey? And one of the last books, and it is really one of my favorites, is Alice in Wonderland, but specifically the annotated Alice in Wonderland. Martin
Right.
Gardner was a columnist for Scientific American, and he wrote about mathematics and logic. And in the annotated Alice, there are just so many, the margins are full of the most amazing little gems. So we all know Alice in Wonderland, and it's an amazing story. But when Alice goes down the rabbit hole, we then learn that Lewis Carroll was fascinated by the idea of making driving a tunnel from, say, New York to Paris. And if you take the shape of the Earth, you can draw a line from one point to another. It's called an arc. And so here's the curve of the Earth, and it would be an arc going straight through. This tunnel that would go straight, which would be incredibly expensive to build.
Yeah.
But halfway through, you'd be going downhill. And then you'd go 3/4 of the way up, and then you'd only have to have power for the last bit. So Lewis Carroll, when he was writing about Alice going down the rabbit hole, he was just coming up with all kinds of crazy ideas. So how would you do an audiobook of the annotated Alice, which in itself, that edition is a great classic? Would you have different voices? Would there be a conversation? So I think that audiobooks, the level of exploration, the level of improvisation and innovation, I would just be fascinated to see what could be done.
Yeah.
And of course,
Yeah.
I want to know all the new books written specifically for audiobooks and secondarily as written books.
I think you've picked some really fascinating choices there. I think that's really. I think one of the things actually that it makes me think, you mentioned Foley artists and radio dramas in there, and it's always a tricky one of where to draw the line between audio dramas and audiobooks, because there are we've seen from Neil Gaiman's Sandman from Audible come out, and that was. Yeah, I mean, that was a drama. That was a full experience. You had multiple cast members. You had, effects going on. It was a very high quality radio drama, but just on demand, I guess. So it's always strange to where to draw the line, because they often kind of overlap, between the sort of separate mediums.
And you worry that it might overlap and also overdo. To hear a voice telling a story. And
Yes.
in where that also is something I encounter with translation, because sometimes you're tempted to subtly explain some things. For instance, they talk about the month of August. Well, Italians all abandon cities during the month of August. Rome is empty during the month of August. Do you explain that to a reader? Do you just subtly hint at it? And I think that the answer is often over explanation, overproduction, and over design can be intrusive to a reader who wants to be alone with it. So I can certainly understand why an audio drama is not always the solution, but there's got to be some kind of continuum where you have a little bit of something. If a narrator is doing one character, do they start to change their voice for that character? I don't know. You're the producer. What?
Yeah, so, well, it kind of depends. It all starts on, it's all relative to the story, what the story needs, and what the author or the rights holder kind of wants. The first thing that I was told, or one of the first things, a very good bit of advice from a director when I was narrating a project was, and you kind of see where it kind of came from. If you're performing something, you always go a little bit bigger than one would in normal life, and I think most people exactly. But I think but what this director said to me was, with an audiobook, most people are listening in their headphones. If they're listening while they're maybe relaxing, or maybe driving driving down a motorway or a highway or something. It's a very intimate process. It's a very intimate thing to be involved in. So you really want to pull that in, reel that in as a performer, and I think that subtlety, that less is more, really applies to audiobooks more than most performance things.
If you think about Treasure Island, Treasure Island, the whole thing is a story being told by an old man in an inn by the ocean.
Yeah.
It's like it's just all being narrated, and you go into it.
Yeah.
You create it in your mind. That's interesting.
I've listened to two audiobook versions of Treasure Island. One is a full cast drama, which acts it all out and things, and one which is more of a subtle narration by one person. And both are exquisite. I enjoyed them both thoroughly, but they are both very different, and I can totally understand why both editions exist.
And I think that if we're just at the sort of dawn of audiobooks, and of course there were books on tape, it's there's been this whole history coming up to it, and radio dramas go back to the 20s and I think the 30s certainly, and so we're at the dawn of it, relatively speaking, but compared to world literature, we're certainly at the dawn, and already we're discovering that it's spacious. It contains worlds. There's a lot of different ways of doing it, and that is something that I think will be interesting in the judging process. One of the things about the judging that I love is that it affords the possibility to choose between choices that producers and directors have made, and also that it is balanced in a way so that it's not all the big, it's not all the biggest publishing houses, but has room for indies and small presses. But we'll get to that in time. But I do think that the idea of just how non-simple an equation this is really interesting.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. You've got a job on your hands. There's a lot of great content coming out.
I am not the only juror. We will be talking more about our jurors, I think, at some point in the months to come.
Yeah, absolutely, we will be. We've got some great guests on, but we'll talk about that in just a moment. Once again, make sure to keep heading over to the official Academy rankings to witness the action firsthand ahead of the big night next year. We're going to be bringing you updates every month on the show, as well as interviews with the most amazing guests sharing their love for this wonderful medium. For more information on what we do here at the Academy, head over to our website, awa.academy, and subscribe to our YouTube channel, hitting that notification bell so you don't miss out on any future videos and episodes. Anthony, it's been a thrill to have you join us. Thank you for spending your time and being on the show, and best of luck with your juror duties. It's certainly not going to be easy with so many incredible titles being released, is it?
Thank you, John. Well, that's the kind of problem I like to have. It's a good one. Looking forward to it, absolutely. And it has been a delight to talk to you. Thank you so much. You're a great conversationalist. It's been a real pleasure. So I think we've explored some interesting ideas about audiobooks. That's a job that I envy you. That's a really interesting area to be in.
Oh, well, thank you. And likewise, this has been a blast for me. I think we've realized, hopefully both realized, that we've only just scratched the surface. And there's so much more we can get into, which of course we will be doing in future episodes. The audiobook industry is wonderful to work in. I'm so lucky to be a part of it. And very similar to you, I work in stories. I work in storytelling and different variations of that, and it's just a privilege. I guess that you'll feel rather similar to that.
Absolutely. Peter Guber, who is the chairman of Sony, who interestingly came to Sony after getting a PhD in philosophy, said that the single most powerful tool any human being has, and certainly any executive, is telling stories. That's how you reach people. That's how you convince people. And that's, I don't know that anybody can change anybody else's mind, but it is certainly the basis of communication.
Yes, absolutely. And I think that is a great way to end this first episode. Thank you very much for tuning in and making us a part of your day.
Yeah, thank you all for listening. This has been much more interesting than I could have imagined.
We'll see you next time. Goodbye for now.